Next, we have specification number 3, which requires us to investigate and explain the differences between inspired and expired air. Now, as we begin this part, remember, the air we breathe in and the air we breathe out are not the same. There are clear differences between them, and in this section, we'll explore exactly what those differences are and why they matter. Now let's move on to the differences between inspired and expired air. The air that we breathe in, known as inspired air, and the air that we breathe out, called expired air, are not the same. They have different gas compositions, and this difference occurs because of the process of gas exchange that takes place in the alveoli, which are tiny air sacs found in our lungs. Inside the alveoli, an important exchange of gases occurs between the air and the blood. Oxygen from the inhaled air moves across the thin alveolar walls and enters the bloodstream. At the same time, carbon dioxide, which is a waste gas produced by the body during respiration, moves from the blood into the alveoli so that it can be exhaled. As a result of this exchange, the air that we breathe out contains less oxygen and more carbon dioxide than the air we breathe in. This is why inspired and expired air differ in their composition. To put it simply, inspired air is rich in oxygen, which is then transported by the blood to all parts of the body. On the other hand, expired air contains a higher amount of carbon dioxide, which is released from the body when we exhale. This exchange of gases between the alveolus and the capillaries is essential for maintaining the oxygen and carbon dioxide balance in our body. Atmospheric air contains about 20 to 21% oxygen, but the body absorbs only around 4 to 5% of it. This means that the air we exhale still contains approximately 16% oxygen. The normal level of carbon dioxide in the air is about 0.04%. However, since carbon dioxide moves from the blood into the alveoli during gas exchange, the air we breathe out contains about 4% carbon dioxide. In addition to this, the air we exhale is warmer and contains more water vapor compared to the air we inhale. This table shows a clear comparison between the composition of inspired air, the air we breathe in, and expired air, the air we breathe out. First, looking at oxygen, we can see that inspired air contains about 21% oxygen, while expired air has only 16%. This decrease happens because the body absorbs oxygen from the air in the lungs during gas exchange to use it for respiration. Next, for carbon dioxide, the inspired air contains only about 0.04%, but in expired air, the amount rises to about 4%. This increase occurs because carbon dioxide is produced as a waste gas in the body and is released from the blood into the alveoli to be exhaled. The amount of nitrogen remains the same in both inspired and expired air, about 78%, because nitrogen is not used or produced in the process of respiration, it simply passes in and out of the lungs unchanged. Lastly, the category of other gases, which includes water vapor, argon, and trace gases, shows a slight increase from 0.96% in inspired air to about 2% in expired air. This is because the air we exhale picks up additional moisture and becomes warmer as it passes through the respiratory tract. Overall, the table highlights that inspired and expired air differ mainly in their oxygen, carbon dioxide, and water vapor content, showing the changes that occur during the process of respiration. Also, these pie charts provide a comparison between inspired air, the air we inhale, and expired air, the air we exhale. They illustrate the proportions of nitrogen, oxygen, carbon dioxide, and other gases present in each. In the chart for inspired air, we can see that it is made up of roughly 78% nitrogen, 21% oxygen, 0.04% carbon dioxide, and about 0.96% other gases, including water vapor and argon. This represents the normal composition of the air we breathe in from the atmosphere. In contrast, the chart for expired air shows that it also contains about 78% nitrogen, but the amount of oxygen decreases to around 16%, while carbon dioxide increases to about 4%. The proportion of other gases, such as water vapor, also rises slightly to about 2% because the exhaled air becomes warmer and more humid as it passes through the respiratory system. From these pie charts, we can observe that the percentage of nitrogen remains unchanged because it is not involved in the process of respiration. However, the amount of oxygen decreases as it is absorbed by the body for energy production, and the carbon dioxide level increases as it is released from the blood into the lungs to be exhaled. This visual comparison clearly demonstrates how the composition of air changes during the process of breathing. Now let's look at the reasons for the differences between inspired and expired air. The oxygen content in inspired air is about 21%, while in expired air it drops to around 16%. This happens because oxygen diffuses from the alveoli into the bloodstream, where it is used by body cells for respiration to release energy. The amount of carbon dioxide in inspired air is only about 0.04%, but it increases to around 4% in expired air. This increase occurs because carbon dioxide is produced as a waste gas during cellular respiration and moves from the blood into the alveoli to be breathed out. When we compare water vapor, inspired air has a lower amount, while expired air contains more. This is because as air passes through the moist lining of the alveoli and respiratory tract, it picks up additional moisture, making the exhaled air more humid. Finally, the proportion of nitrogen remains the same in both inspired and expired air, at about 78%. Nitrogen is an inert gas and is not involved in the body's respiratory or metabolic processes, so its concentration does not change during breathing. So, we can finally conclude with a summary of the differences between inspired and expired air. In inspired air, the amount of oxygen is higher, whereas in expired air, the oxygen level is lower because it is used by the body during respiration. On the other hand, carbon dioxide is lower in inspired air but higher in expired air, as it is produced in the body and released during exhalation. The amount of water vapor is less in the air we breathe in but greater in the air we breathe out, since the exhaled air picks up moisture from the respiratory tract. Similarly, the temperature of inspired air is cooler, while expired air is warmer due to the body's internal heat. Lastly, the proportion of nitrogen remains the same in both inspired and expired air, as nitrogen is not involved in any respiratory process.